Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Boroughs and Burbs, Season 4, Episode 132. Today on the show, I'm going to hit share screen. I want to thank gracefarms.org. They just had a great summit on sustainable architecture, and you can see the world-famous architecture of the river building on the screen. Today on the show, we're going to talk about authentic interiors, rooms that tell stories. We have the author, Philip Gorrivan, and former editor of Cottages and Gardens. This is Philip's page. He's an interior designer, and he is the author of that new book. And today on the show, we've got DJ Carey, the editor of Connecticut, Cottages and Gardens, and we're going to talk about their journey and what they think about current design trends and authentic interiors. And with that, welcome, Philip. Welcome, DJ.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to
Pleasure
be
being here.
And welcome, Roberto. Where are you today?
I'm on the Upper West Side. You know that.
Yeah. I don't know if you know it, Roberto, because you're in the city, but Connecticut Cottages and Gardens is a very, very big deal here in New Canaan. I mean, you can't turn around in any doctor's office in Fairfield County, any lobby in Fairfield County, you're going to see multiple issues of Connecticut Cottages and Gardens. It's the Bible of design. When I pulled up the current issue, I noticed that Burr and Salvatore, who've been on the show, are featured. And Robert Cardello, who was on the show with Scott Hobbs, is featured, and Bruce Beinfeld. Bruce Beinfeld is the designer of the Corbin District in Darien. Very big deal. So
Yes.
DJ Carey gets the very best designers and builders and design professionals throughout Fairfield County and features them every month in the magazine. So with that, DJ, how do you do it?
Well, drink a lot of coffee. And I go to a lot of houses, I go to a lot of events, and I was an anthropology major and my mom was a cultural anthropologist, and there's this way of developing your research called participant observant, and that's exactly what I am. I live in the area that I cover, so it really makes it authentic. Going to Philip's title, I think authenticity is driving the design world right now.
Cultural anthropology.
Yes.
Wow. That's specific.
It's a long word.
And you worked with Philip when he was editor?
No, I was the editor-in-chief and he was a contributing writer.
Okay.
Not to put you down, Philip.
No. Well, also, I just happen to have a place in Litchfield County, Connecticut, in Washington, and you didn't really have coverage of that area.
No, and I really felt that was a miss.
Yeah.
Because to me, when I first became the editor 20 years ago, Litchfield was described to me as the Hamptons of Connecticut. So I knew I had to have some kind of coverage so that I would be covering the state in the way it should be covered.
Yeah. And it's very much grown, right? There's so much happening there, so many more restaurants and
yeah, it's really grown.
Yeah.
Philip, tell us how you became the Philip Gorrivan who we know today. Where did you grow up? Where are you from? Bring us.
Sure. Okay. So I grew up in Portland, Maine, and I guess like my earliest memory is thumbing through the pages of Architectural Digest when I was like 11 years old, and thinking, like opening the pages and just being like, wow, how do people live like this? These interiors are amazing. And I mean, it very much was like a new world to me. I grew up in a house where my father collected early Americana, and my mother was very much this modernist. And I guess that although we didn't really have a designed house, it definitely informed sort of the way I look at design and how I would say how important it is to have an eclectic mix in any space. But anyway, so it's just something I was passionate about. And I never really thought more about that than just loving interior design. I went on to college and moved to New York, and I was in the business world. I worked for Hearst magazines. Then I worked for some internet companies, and then I ended up working more on like private equity. And it's funny, like this became, for a long time, interior design was my hobby, and it was my special. It's like my little special escape, whether it was designing my own house in Connecticut or our apartment. And I just realized, I guess, it was important moment around just right around 9/11. I realized, I didn't really enjoy what I was doing, and what I really loved was, interiors and design and everything that's involved. And so, like right after 9/11, so this is well over 20 years ago, I changed my career. I went to work for an interior design company for a couple of years. And so it was really fast. I took classes, and the more I learned, the more I loved. And I guess it's about the same time I met you, DJ.
Yeah,
in Connecticut.
I had just started at the magazine in 2004 because this year's our 20th anniversary.
Yeah,
And I had heard about this guy, Philip, from Alexa, my assistant. She's like, you got
right.
to meet this guy. He's a really good designer. So we met at an event and she introduced us, and then the rest is history.
Yeah. And I would
So
say, now I've been doing this for well over 20 years, and I've done over 200 projects, and yeah, I never look back. I very much feel like I found my calling.
So
And I
when I
do
look
it.
at your work, and I've been showing it on the screen while you've been talking, I'm struck by the range. You talk about authentic interiors, and I thought we were going to be talking about houses, but there's a range here that spans from the New York waterfront and apartments, Kips Bay, Palm Beach, and certainly, as you mentioned, Litchfield County and Fairfield County. So your projects span both the urban and suburban and country
And
environments.
also commercial, John. He also did Ocean House, which was one of my favorite projects he ever did. He did a penthouse there, and it was really glorious for a hotel space. He created a whole uh persona. And so when you walked into it, you felt like you were very comfortable there, but he included the surfboards and that kind of stuff. But it was really brilliant what he did.
So
And that
why
was
a
a
book
fun project.
now, Philip? Why authentic interiors, rooms that tell a story?
So this is something this book has been a long time in the works. I've been thinking a lot about what I wanted to write. I didn't want to just write a monograph of my work, which you see often designers just showing their work. I wanted to talk about sort of my philosophy on design, and I think what it comes down to, and if you look at, I've been thinking a lot about, I've thought a lot about this, but the best designed rooms and the best designed spaces tell tell a successful story of the people who inhabit them. And I think that is the essence of good interior design is, understanding who your clients are. I mean, I know it's a lot of work. It's like almost like writing a biography in some ways. You really need to do your research and understand who's living there and what motivates them and what's important to them. Do they have interests? Do they collect art? And, like most things in life, the more work you put in up front, the better the result is. So, and people are always talking about like what's the magic in interior design. And I think that's it, really. It's just getting to know your client really well, well enough so that you can create a space that is an extension of who they are.
I
But
just
but
Go ahead.
but I think the genius of a really good interior designer is that you take what they think they are, their story, and you make it even better.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what puts
Mhm.
your projects and
Right.
the real professionals
Yeah.
in a separate category.
I just had lunch with David Genovese, and he talked about the Corbin district. And it's ironic that you say this because he said I went out and to and hired one of the world's greatest architects. And I got his designs, and I determined that there was no way that that was going to work in Darien. He really didn't know his client, me, and he really didn't know what was going to pass with planning and zoning. So I went and I hired another architect, and it happens to be Bruce Beinfield, who was hired to do the Corbin district in Darien, and David sung his praises, and he said he got his customer, he got Darien, he listened and he internalized that. He didn't give us the Beinfield look. He gave us our look. He gave us the Darien look. And so that's what I hear you saying, is that every client is going to bring something else, and you've got to understand that client in order to do a
Well,
phenomenal.
and also I think there's a difference between, and it obviously, and it shows, a well-designed room is a room that has an interesting narrative to it. It has a narrative, and it has, if you will, like a soul. Like a good room has a soul. You walk in, you're like, wow, this is a really beautifully designed space. And then there are rooms you walk into and they feel very flat and incomplete.
Yeah.
So
There are a lot of those.
yeah.
When you're designing a house, and we're talking specifically about rooms, and rooms have a certain character and they bring you a certain emotion when you walk into them. However, within a house as a whole, does it have to be thematic throughout the entire house, or can every room really generate something different? And I guess it still has to maintain that theme to some extent, or you're being jarred from one
Do they
room
have
to
to
another.
work together, right?
Yeah, no, I think that rooms, so that's a good question. And often when we're designing houses, or apartments, I think the rooms have to communicate to one another in some way. There has to be a thread from room to room, but again, each room I think should be able to tell its own story as well, and because each room has a different use.
Yeah.
Sure. We spend a lot of time, talking about how rooms are going to look, and we really drill down. And when you drill down in a room, beyond the room, you have four walls, and you have different objects that are going in the space, the art, and it's almost like a series of vignettes in every room.
But Philip, I will say what I loved that you included in your book is that there's this beautiful hallway leading to the primary bedroom. And what I'm seeing, John, is that architects and designers are paying a lot more attention to those spaces that we travel through. So they're no longer these long corridors of nothing, that they are in themselves becoming a room that you experience. And it's really recent that people are that focused. And Philip has a great example where he created a gallery wall. The wallpaper goes up to the ceiling, it's on the walls, and it's absolutely beautiful. And if you think about, he's actually doing that whole Japanese technique of creating layers, that it's not an instant grab. Like he's presenting the primary bedroom by creating interest right before it. So you always experience in these spaces. It's just an interesting concept that I think a lot of architects, I know Scott has done this, where they're talking about those transition spaces, the hallways that we spend a lot of time in, but we need to make them more interesting.
So you said the word wallpaper, and that's the second time this week I've heard that wallpaper
It's back.
might be back.
It is back in a big way.
We love wallpaper.
Philip has designed wallpaper
and color. If I look at your magazine covers and I try and tease out a theme,
there is no theme.
Color and design is back, fresh start. I'm seeing bold colors here, right? Look at that lighten up last summer. Bold colors and wallpaper. Does this spell the end of the modern farmhouse where we were just doing black windows and white walls and very clean and very stark? Or is there room for both?
There's room for both, but I will say that anything that really is so set date wise is out the door. Like the black windows are great, but they were done with such enthusiasm that you're seeing it everywhere. And I think people are tired of it. So I think you're going to see that lessening a bit. I'm not saying it's going away. And I also think that good designers like Philip know that when they walk into a very modern house, what they're discovering and injecting those houses with is the use of layers of texture and materials. While keeping a very minimal color palette, it's a lot more interesting. And there are more products on the market now that allow designers like Philip to create those really interesting limited palette interiors.
I find that a lot of this is really for someone who this is their home for a long period of time.
Yes,
Because
not a vacation house.
Or even, some people, they buy a house, they know they're going to be there for 3 or 4 years, and then they're going to sell it. So that such a choice could be a beautiful thing, but it's not going to necessarily appeal to everybody else. I mean, they might like the idea, the design concept of it, but like, right. I like a different palette. I like, whether it's color or whatever. So I would think that there is some limitation to some of it.
Yes, and that's why I think when you have a client that's kind of nervous about using color and they're really interested in possibly selling their home in a few years, they're using a combination of materials, beautiful metals, so it's all very modern and not splashy. And there's this thing about, luxury is just kind of being less glitzy and more thoughtful.
Mm-hmm.
Is that always been, you've been doing, give me the long view on Connecticut. You've been doing, you're editor for the last 20 years. Is that sort of a Connecticut sensibility? Don't give me glitzy, give me authentic textures, give me stone, give me wood.
I think part of the reason, John, is the fact that Connecticut has a limited range of architectural styles because we're very heavy in the colonials. We're heavy in the colonials and
the modern houses.
Yeah, our moderns and shingle style. So I think that Connecticut, because of, you only know what you've experienced. So if you come from a modern house, and you grew up in one, you're not going to transition well to something that's not modern because that's what there's a real DNA in where you grow up and where you end up. And it's interesting to see that. I mean, you have moments where you'll break from that, but I think like Philip's own house in Washington, Connecticut is a beautiful example of taking what's traditional and colonial and making it livable for the modern family, like with the kitchens and the bathrooms and the walk-in closets. And I think designers are getting better versed in keeping the tenets of our DNA and then making it more contemporary for how people like to live.
I'm pulling up on the screen one that you're calling modern farmhouse, one of Philip's designs. And there's a lot of wood and there's a lot of stone, and yet with all that texture, it's clean in between. Not a lot of pictures on the walls, and not a broad range of color.
So that's that farmhouse. That was a dilapidated space, and I worked with a local barn builder, Ed Carey, up in Roxbury,
incredible. He's the king of barns.
Yeah, he really is. But we wanted to do something unique with this space and make it feel less like a Vermont barn and more Scandinavian in nature. And so
what's the difference?
Well, we went lighter. So we used a lot of plaster, and we went with lighter finishes. We wanted it to feel, we wanted, that's the big problem with barns also, is that the light is often limited in a barn.
Those little windows.
The little windows. That's also a big objection for a lot of people, I think, when they look at barns. They're not bright enough. There's not enough light in them. So everything we did to enhance the sense of light in the space. But this is on a little compound in New Milford, Connecticut for this wonderful family. And they had the main house, which I've been working on for many years. And they wanted a barn, they wanted a property on their, they wanted a house on their property that they could go for like a staycation and get away. And again, walk into a different, because their house is very colonial. They want to walk into a space and feel transformed, like they're somewhere else. So it's fun. It's a fun story. It's really, and this barn gets used all the time. They love
Philip, tell them about how you created that second floor, because it was interesting with barns. Sometimes there's not a complete second floor. And so people then are like, well, I don't want an exposed bathroom. And that bathroom in the house is incredible.
Yeah. So what we created, there are basically two loft spaces. One loft space is above the kitchen, and the other loft space is sort of in the back, above the two bathrooms. But I mean, it's effectively 2 bedrooms, but they've got 3 kids, so it's a kid's room one side, and then it's the master in the other. But I mean, I'm not sure if you can see it above.
There's a bathroom.
Yeah, and this is the primary bedroom here.
It's beautiful. Scott, from a construction perspective, how do you solve for like heat? I would imagine that a heat in a house like that is very difficult to maintain.
You asking me?
Yeah, I'm
No, Scott.
Oh,
Yeah, so HVAC is one of those things that the builder has to go ahead and work very closely with the design professionals to try to go ahead and get that adequate space to bring up heat in the right places and drop some cooling in. And sometimes you end up doing false framing, or you add different insulation, or radiant floor is a great thing. Radiant heat in the floor is a great way to do it. But it does take having experienced design professionals who know how to try to hide what is necessary to make it comfortable for people is very important.
Do you ever tell these storytelling designers no?
Yes. But we tell the client, eventually it reaches a point where you literally slide the indemnification form across that says, I, the owner, understand I am not going to be happy from a temperature point of view in this space. I won't hold Hobbs responsible. And at that
Don't
point, then they
call
might
me at
actually
midnight.
listen.
yeah,
Then they might listen.
smart.
So what kind of trends are we seeing? I ask this because I have a client looking at a house right now, and we went and did the inspection yesterday, and she looked around and she said, I'm going to just have to take down all these walls. It's just not bright enough. It is just not big enough. And I said, wait a minute. Why don't we engage a designer? Why don't you live in the house a little bit, more than a week before we take down all the walls and make it one big room? So what do you say to that? Are we still getting into this open floor plan trend, or are we moving away from that and making some cozy spaces? I mean, is
You answered
right?
it. It's
Yeah, you did answer it.
flexibility. It's flexibility. They want the open spaces. They want the 3-season spaces, and then they want the pocket doors where they can go into a space and have a Zoom. So
Versatility is what I hear you saying. I need it both ways.
Yeah, because they want options. They want, when they're feeling like they're entertaining, they just want to open up the house. But then when they're like working on something, they don't want to listen to the kids, then they want the door closed.
I am finding more and more that people do want small spaces, though. I remember when there was a time when you look at sort of these new build houses, and there was not one small room in the house. And people are regularly asking me to have, people want small rooms, small spaces, whether it's a small sitting room or a small office or a small library, which delights me. I love small rooms. And I think the best homes are homes that have a mixture of small and large rooms.
It's interesting in the city, I'm finding that a little bit more as well, where people are saying, I don't want it wide open. I want my kitchen separated from the other space. I don't want to hear the noise. I don't want to see it, et cetera, et cetera. And one client, I was like, you could remove this wall. Like, no. we kind of like the compartmentalization of this, and
Yeah.
and I'm seeing a little bit more of that in the past couple of years. So it's interesting.
How about little tiny rooms like powder rooms and your ability? I mean, on the one hand, you're very restricted by a limited amount of space, but on the other hand, you can choose from materials, exquisite
spend more.
materials. Yeah, you can really stretch.
Well, the nice thing also with small rooms is, just talking about design, is you can create little jewel boxes,
Exactly.
spaces, which is so nice. Whether you could, lacquer a powder room, it could be all hand painted wall covering. But there are things you can do in small rooms that you can't do in large rooms.
That is so funny that you say that, because it really is interesting. The number of powder rooms that I see, especially along Park Avenue and Fifth Avenue, the apartment may have a certain feel to it, and you walk in, and it's so different, and it's something that really is like a jewel box. And you might encounter the buyer in another part of the apartment. Like, did you see the powder room?
Exactly.
It's
And
like,
I think that's what they set out to do, is like anything they couldn't do in the rest of the house, they're going to do it in that powder room.
yeah,
If they couldn't use wallpaper, they're going to do it.
yeah. And there's wallpaper on the ceiling, and it's
Exactly.
yeah.
I see you're willing to go bold with the colors. Did I just see a lime room? What went into that? Let's see. Where's
The
there it
citron.
is.
Oh, that.
Wow.
So that's an apartment on 64th Street in Manhattan, and it was a couple. This is a man who hired me who was going through a divorce, and it's a really nice story, because he loves it. The apartment's wonderful, but he wanted to give the apartment new life, because he was going into a different, next chapter of his life. So I helped him. Well, we created this space that was very, very different from the way it looked before. It was like night and day. And, of course, with apartments, everything, it's basically you're dealing with four walls, an enclosed space. And it's amazing, the power of color and the power of finishes can do to a space. But he wanted this to feel completely different when he walked into it. And
It's beautiful.
I think we did it. Yeah. Well,
Extraordinary color. It's just unbelievable.
yeah.
But
the
you know why
that lacquer is amazing.
But you know why it works is that Philip did that trick where graphically he framed it with white, which controls a very bold color statement. And more people can live with a bolder color if you graphically contain it with white.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also the white trim is consistent throughout the whole apartment
Right.
as well. So that's the one element, I think, or the one line that connects all the rooms.
Why lacquer? I noticed that this is a shiny, reflective lacquer ceiling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've done that before. I mean, my mother's got one in her place, and she says it's the favorite thing about her entire apartment is the lacquered ceiling. Why do you do lacquer?
Oh,
It's
well,
so
lacquer,
luxurious.
it's so sexy.
Yeah.
Look at it, everything reflects off of a lacquered wall or ceiling.
And it takes a lot of work because you
A
have
lot of
to,
work.
the guys have to sand in between every layer to get that
Right.
beautiful sensibility. And it's so tactile for your eye. Like you want to go up and touch it because it's so rich and
It looks
luxurious.
wet.
Yes, it's wet.
And unfortunately, it's harder to do lacquer now because it's all done
Yes.
mostly with oil paints. But there are some new paint brands out there we're exploring with, actually, because people still come to me and they want lacquered rooms.
But some walls aren't made for lacquer because if they're
Yeah.
lumpy and they don't look so
Right,
pretty.
right. Well, also I was looking at some older design books, if you look at the lacquered rooms that Billy Baldwin did,
I was going to
David
say
Hicks,
it's brown
they-
lacquer.
but they
Oh my
weren't
God.
perfect. They weren't perfect.
They weren't?
No, they had imperfections in them. And I think imperfections, again, I think imperfections can be fine.
Well,
Some
because
people,
it's the hand-heart connection. Someone
absolutely,
knows that it was
it's
done
a
by
hand-done
hand.
process.
Yeah.
So,
I live in a
someone,
200-year-old house, and it sounds like you're giving me permission to go with some lacquer. So
Yes, John,
Okay.
go with the lacquer.
taking
So
notes.
just so the lacquering process, it's usually about 10 coats of lacquer, and you wet sand in between each coat because you don't want any bubbles and you don't want any imperfections in each coat. And then the final coat goes on, and all these layers of paint create that depth that you see.
All right, I'm going
It's
to
really
ask the same
special.
old question in yet another way. It's the trend question.
Yeah.
It occurs to me when I look across the nation that you have two different groups who are buying real estate. You have millennials buying a first home, or first apartment, and then you have a lot of baby boomers buying a second home, second apartment. And I'm just wondering whether, because those two groups are in the market, whether we're seeing the millennials. Can you tease out anything that are particularly important to the millennials when they're buying those first homes? Scott Hobbs I have kids who are in their 20s now looking at their first apartments. Do you have any advice for them on how to
Closets.
think about that first apartment? And do you have any advice for Scott Hobbs as he thinks about his golden years and buying his, beach house and his second home? So
Well, Scott knows, but it's closets, closets, closets. It is amazing, and they want dishwashers and washers and dryers on every floor. They want convenience, and they want to feel like that is luxury for them, and that's what they're looking for.
millennials and boomers? I mean, do we both ask for the same things when we hire Philip?
No, boomers, I think, ask for the dressing area off the closet and the washer dryer. I think our generation wants less steps and wants, a bedroom on one floor, and they want the guest
Yeah.
rooms separated from the primary bedroom for
Yeah.
all the grandkids that come to stay. And I don't think that the younger buyer is interested in acres and acres of property. Unless you're hitting the 0.5%.
It seems to me that the millennials are trying to get a very efficient space. They're trying to get, as you say, closets, a lot of storage space. They're trying to live small. And it seems to me that when we get to my age and older, Roberto, we're looking to sort of simplify the palette, and we're looking for clean lines, and we're trying open spaces. I don't want to just clear the mind, especially on my second home, on the beach. It's why I go to the country. It's why I go to the beach, to get away and clear. So are you seeing those kinds of things?
It's interesting. I see that slightly differently. Is it someone who would go to, the Hamptons or Connecticut for a second home, that's the place where they would take actually more choice, be a little bit more bold and risky with decorating certain rooms and things like that, because it's not necessarily their primary place. It becomes kind of like the dreamy place that they go to, and they can allow their minds to allow their imaginations to run. But I don't know. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right.
I agree with you. I find that for many vacation homes, whether they're on the beach or they're in the countryside
or the mountains,
the mountains, people, my clients want spaces that are very different from what they're used to in their day-to-day, so they can feel like they're escaping to somewhat place different.
Philip, do you have a place in the city?
I do.
So tell me the difference of what the motif or the theme of your house is in Litchfield County versus what it is in the city.
Yeah, so my house in Litchfield County, it's a 18th century house. The interiors are very much a mix of different periods, but it's essentially feels like a colonial house. I have a lot of antiques. I have some modern pieces to add, just a little bit of a counterpoint to the antiques. I have color in the spaces. My apartment in New York is in the East Village, and I wanted to, and again, this is part of the way I like to design, is I wanted to, sort of absorb what was around me in the East Village, as one would, when you have a house in Connecticut, think about the architecture around you, think about the geographic area So in my East Village apartment, I actually I wanted to feel like sort of very different and not feel like you're even on the Upper East Side or any other neighborhood in New York. And it's actually in the book, but I found soon after moving in, I met this street artist at the coffee place across the street from me, and we just got talking, and I don't know, one thing led to another, and anyway, I ended up hiring him to paint a wall in my apartment with all graffiti and street
Oh,
art.
that's fantastic.
But I felt like I wanted something in that space to make it feel like I was where I was.
What sits in front
Actually,
of that?
incidentally, he became really famous, and he did a collaboration with Louis Vuitton. And now that
That's because he
mural
did your
is on
apartment first.
it's on my dining room wall, and it can never be removed.
Your apartment just went up in value.
Exactly.
Well,
It's one of a kind, Philip.
I can't take it with me.
Wasn't it
So
featured
what
on
sits in
the
front
But
of
so I
that
think
wall?
that it's important to think about where you are geographically in the world as well when you're designing a space.
But let me ask you something. I read something that you'll create a wall of some sort that's lacquered or something, and then you put something in front of it which allows it some sort of contrast. Or what do you have in front of that graffiti wall?
Oh, so the graffitied wall I have here, let me pull it up. Do you see it?
What page?
It's on page it's page 53, East Village apartment.
This one?
Yes. So if you go further down,
You can just
Oh,
see it.
I saw a bit of it.
Yeah, I saw a bit of it too.
oh wait, what happened? Oh wait,
That's as much as they're going to show me, but I see a little
Oh,
bit
that's
of
right
the
there.
graffiti.
here, I have
Yeah.
a picture of it. Here it is. Can you see it?
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
see it on yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
So yeah, it's wonderful. It makes me happy every time I walk into the space. And I've used this artist now for other projects as well. He did an apartment for me in Dumbo. He painted a column for a client.
So do you introduce them
it's
to your
something-
client as the artist you discovered or the artist who works for Louis Vuitton?
The artist I discovered.
Depends on the
That's the
client.
best thing, though. That's the best. I love that's the exciting part also about living in New York is, discovering people like that.
Let's talk about fear, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm afraid if I give my design, I'm afraid of a lime green room.
Yeah.
Should I be? I mean,
No,
Right.
no,
No, go with it.
no,
I mean,
go
there's
for it. Go
I'm
for it.
afraid that my mood, if I have white walls, I can hang a picture. If I change my mind, I can hang a different picture. I can
Right.
swap out the sofa. But I'm a
Right.
little bit afraid that if I hire you and you give me a lime green in the first room, and then we're telling a different story in the next room and it's orange,
No, that's
then I
not how
might fall-
Philip works.
No, yeah, no, I would design
the
something
theme
that,
is fear. Why should we get
Yeah,
over
well,
yeah,
every client is fearful because
absolutely.
they're letting you create for them and they're not doing it themselves. And I think it's a scary proposition. And you know what puts the fear in you? Your dearest friend or your next door neighbor who comes in to make a comment.
Scott Hobbs has orange countertops, I think. Do you have orange countertops at your house, Scott Hobbs?
We do in the laundry room.
I love that.
Okay.
You
Have
see,
you-
that's like his powder room. He put it in the laundry room. It's
Oh,
not his
I would
kitchen.
never push somebody to do something that they're truly not
Crazy.
comfortable
Yeah.
with. And I work I have a lot of spaces I've designed that are very neutral. I'm always trying to push in maybe a pop of color here and there in a space. But again, ultimately it's you who are going to live there and you need to be happy.
So can we just
So
talk
my
about
job is to introduce different options for you.
Right.
but let me ask you something just from a practical standpoint of cost. That guy's foyer or whatever room that was, it seemed like it was a large gallery.
Yeah.
To paint it nicely, beautifully, well done, might cost $2,000 or $3,000, $4,000 to paint that room.
Yeah.
Now to do it the way you did it, is like 20,000, right?
Or more,
Yeah. So
even
I mean,
more. Yeah. Yeah.
that's a
Well, yeah, I mean,
choice.
again, everybody has a different design budget and everyone has different design priorities in a space.
Right. But I'm telling you, standing in that space would put a smile on my face every day. I mean, that is what the difference is that you can have white walls and that's all well and good and you'll be safe, but you'll be bored unless you do something with art or a texture. It becomes static so quickly, and I think that's why gray died finally in decorating, is that people thought by painting their walls gray they did their job in color, but they never enhanced it, so it really became a one-note wonder.
Wait, gray is dead?
Yes.
When did that happen?
I pushed it out the window
You
about
pushed
a
it out
year
the
ago.
window. Thank you, DJ.
Better
I
call
couldn't
Melissa,
Gray was
John.
every-
stand it.
Gray
You
was
didn't read about
everywhere
that,
for a
John? She
while.
pushed it out the
Everywhere.
window.
I mean,
What can I
Scott
do?
has painted
So what
enough
can I do in my
gray
kitchen?
walls.
So what can I
You
do
know,
in my
I did it-
kitchen now if I'm
Yeah.
if I'm not doing white, right? White is out and the gray is out. What can I do? Are we doing matchy matchy? Are we doing black and white contrast? Are we doing pops of color? I remember color. I remember coming into some of these
Yeah.
kitchens a few years ago and the realtor saying, "We're not doing matchy matchy anymore. The
No.
center island no longer matches the rest of the countertops. It's supposed to stand on its own. It's supposed to be
It can
piece of
relate.
furniture."
It should relate to the rest of the cabinets
Right.
and the countertops. But I agree. I think that, an island is an opportunity to introduce something different.
Incredible texture.
Space.
But you know
Yeah.
what's happened is that after COVID, people really opened up the kitchen. So it was open to a family room and all these other spaces. And what happened is then that room really became designed like furniture or a living room. It stopped being so functional in terms of how designers approach that space. And that's the beauty of the kitchens today. And I know that Scott has done some incredible kitchens where they're changing the palettes, they're combining materials that you wouldn't normally combine, and it's really beautiful and it's not shocking to the system, and it feels right. It feels like it's more interesting. It doesn't look like a white lab.
You're asking about also like what is, we talked about gray, we talked about white. I think that white tones, creamy tones are in now. I mean, for neutrals,
Right.
but I think it's warmer. Like there's been a gradual shift toward warmer tones as opposed to cool tones in spaces. And I'm
Why?
seeing
The
that more and more.
your skin doesn't look so good in those cool tones, let me tell you.
Yeah.
You want to look healthy, you need the warmer tones.
All right. Innovation. What are we seeing? So, what are some of the really innovative ideas? We've already talked about the lacquer. We've talked about the bold lime. It's okay. Don't be afraid of lime green. We've talked about don't need to be matchy matchy. What are some of the innovations that we're seeing in designs that are emerging? And it could be all over the map. I mean, are we seeing electronics, right? The smart home and window shade innovations? Are we seeing lighting innovations? Where are some of the innovations that we're seeing across these rooms that tell a story?
Well,
do you want to go?
I was going to do kitchen and bath. You can do.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead, Philip.
Oh, I was just say, well, in lighting, everything now is LED.
Right.
So it's all LED, and there are companies out there who, I mean, the quality of LED lighting is extraordinary now. I think we're in this like whole new world of lighting. I mean, we have access to things that we never did before.
And also the wellness component in lighting
Yeah.
is key these days, about following your circadian rhythm and when
Right.
you wake up, and then the shades are included in that. I mean, it's all about feeling better
Right.
and making the space work for what your pattern of being in that space
And
is.
you can paint and you can design in light. You can change the colors up daily or with the mood or with the season.
Exactly.
And the other thing I'd say, you know, the other big design trend I'm seeing, and again, it's because of technology, because is wallpaper. There's so much wallpaper on the market, and wallpaper companies are doing really well, especially digital printing. You
Right.
can basically do anything now, and you know, you can take a room and you can find a wallpaper that looks like, you know, faux oak paneling. It's actually like veneer, and you can put it on a wall, and all of a sudden you have like a paneled room. It's amazing what wallpaper can do to a space.
So it's gotten a bad rap. Millennials say 10 years ago, we're saying, I don't want
Yeah,
wallpaper because I don't want to buy a house that looks like my grandparents' house. And what
yeah.
you're saying is when I think wallpaper, I should not think of my mother's wallpaper or my
No.
grandmother's wallpaper.
Well, the scale has changed so much, John. If you look at the cover of Philip's book, it's a floral, but the scale and the size of those blooms are massive. So it doesn't look like your grandmother's house. And I think that's what we have to remember is that a lot has changed in terms of technology, and it's enabled companies to really explore different types, treatments of a floral. Like right there, that's not what you would typically think of when you said, oh, I have, you know, floral wallpaper in my living room.
Well, and the other thing, I'll say that, so that paper, I custom designed it for my client in the space, but it's very easy now to, you know, to work with, to design something like right, you know, immediately
So
for
it's
somebody.
custom,
It's custom, but you know, it didn't take weeks and weeks to do.
right?
So let
And
me
that's
ask you
the
something.
beauty too of like of you know the digital printing that's out there now is that you can I mean you can actually create something like a wall covering and a design that is very, very unique for not only the space but also your client.
We talked about the flexibility of, for example, lacquering something because you might not, changing it would be a big endeavor. It's the same. That's the way when I think of wallpaper, one of the biggest things is it's a commitment. If I put it on, if I ever want to change it, to take it off is going to be so onerous and be expensive, et cetera. And I may, I'm just not going to want to do it. So as the technology improved as to the application and removal of paper such that
Oh
someone
yeah.
could
Oh, yeah.
change, it
It's
has.
amazing. There are companies now that sell adhesive wall covering.
That you could
Um,
just peel off.
Oh,
yeah,
that's amazing.
So,
when you're
for
done.
rentals, we did it in my daughter's apartment on the east side where we applied just one wall in the nursery of wallpaper. And they can just peel it off when they move out.
Yeah.
That's a lot
But
easier.
yeah,
I had a friend who had a house. He bought an apartment, and there was layers. This is an old apartment. It was
Oh.
layers of wallpaper, and we would go over and we'd watch a game at his house, and he'd have like a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, and he'd be sitting there with an iron as we're
Oh,
all
with the
talking.
steamer.
And
With
then
the
he would
steamer.
scrape it, and then he would go, and then he would be like, "Hey, can you do this for that?" And we'd all be up there like, "This is like ridiculous."
No wonder you don't like wallpaper.
Yeah. So
I'm going to say that in terms of kitchen and bath, there's a lot going on, and some of it came out of COVID, that whole food insecurity. One of the things that we're seeing a lot of is that people are growing a lot more of their own herbs and vegetables within their own home, and their appliances that answer to that. There's also, I just saw at the recent kitchen bath show, there's what is called a cold pantry, and it's a unit that's 8 by 10 feet that allows you to keep your vegetables fresh, and then it has a deep freezer for the ice cream and the milk, and it's a walk-in unit, and it's what you see in professionals' kitchens, but now they've made it for the home. And then in terms of wellness in the bathroom, I mean, Scott can talk to this. There's everything from saunas to all kinds of therapies, color therapy, steam rooms, and showers that have every nozzle. Kohler came out with this system where you can put these attachments onto a hand shower that scrubs you and buffs you, and it's like being in a spa, but in your own home. So we're seeing a lot of that whole wellness factor into the kitchen and bath areas.
So what I'm hearing is that we're a long ways away from the houses of even 20 years ago. That houses have just gotten a whole lot smarter. They're healthier for us. You've given me permission to actually explore with color and take down walls and put up walls. And actually, you said with the pocket doors, actually have more versatile spaces.
Right.
I'm seeing this true when I'm showing houses and they're like, well, tell me about this house. Well, this is a 20-year-old house, and there's a big difference between a 20-year-old house and the innovations that are going into today's houses. Big differences. And you can see it as soon as you walk in and you flip the light switch and you see the sound system and how they did the sound system. And they're so innovative now with because they can, with new wireless mesh networks, they're just able to do so much more through technology.
Yeah.
I have to say, I have to come back to the magazine. I polled the folks in my office before I opened up the show, and I said, Cottages and Gardens, do you read it? And they're like, oh yeah. I not only read it, I cut the little pictures out each month and I store them away. It's like, it's still, so to anybody who thinks, oh yeah, the magazines are in the past, just go to the internet. I think it's important to note that Cottages and Gardens is a curated space, and the internet, we all know, has got, infinity, but it's not curated. And so I really love the fact that you talked to me about some of the best professionals in my area who I can go meet and talk to. And you talked to me about why they're innovating in their designing and building. And I think that, so it's, I had to say that. I polled everybody.
Thank you.
And they said, this is still the IT magazine, the Bible of design out here in Connecticut.
But
Now,
I will tell you a little secret. The real luxury of our book is its size and the fact that it takes time to go through a magazine versus when you're online, you're clicking through very quickly, and time is a luxury these days. So it's a funny thing that's happened along the way. Our size allows people and your eye to take time to engage with the imagery and the copy. And because we have a lot of white space, it isn't jarring. And we have a great design team that creates beautiful layouts, and we have great designers in the state of Connecticut. So I'm lucky with where I'm situated.
I think I saw that Scott Hobbs advertises in your magazine. I was going to put him on the spot and ask him.
Oh, geez, poor
How
Scott.
come, Scott?
Well, because of the editor, of course. I mean, it all comes
Thanks,
together.
Scott.
No, I mean, I agree actually with DJ that, I mean, I think Cottage and Gardens does a spectacular job of showcasing the talented architects and designers and the work that they put together. And we love being associated with those sort of projects. And so we think it's the right format to be, to participate.
Well, thank you.
It's also because your clients, right, who build and design and build the very best in Fairfield County, they read this magazine, right? So it's not just everybody reads it. It's the people who matter to you read it. And they spend a lot of time with it, to DJ's point.
Do you at all feel that, you're documenting what's happening, or do you feel in some way that you're driving the narrative of what's next? You muted somehow.
A little of both.
Mhm.
So I said a little of both. I don't know why my
Yeah.
thing went into mute.
No, we heard.
I think that there are moments where I see something that I love that I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna definitely print this. And then I see things that have stayed fresh throughout all these years. So it's a little of both, because I think Connecticut is a little bit of the yin and yang. It's not one note wonder.
I want to thank you. We got to wrap this up. We got 1 minute to go. I just want to thank you, Philip. I want to tell everybody, go find Authentic Interiors, Rooms That Tell Stories by Philip Gorrivan at your favorite bookstore, local bookstore.
Thank you.
And I want to thank Connecticut Cottages and Gardens. DJ, these
Thank
are the Bible of design out here in Connecticut and probably out there on Long Island. Maybe we should talk to your counterpart in the Hamptons and find
Yes,
out
you
about the
should.
New York version next.
Yep.
Find out how it's different. But thank you so much for joining us today. This is really fun.
This was really fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
This is a
so
really fun
much.
Thank you
show.
so much, guys. So informative, fabulous to get to know you guys.
You have final thought on what we can expect next? Something groundbreaking? Some great prediction?
I'll let Philip take that.
I mean, every time we pick a new color, it's
Yeah.
like eggplant. Really, give me
Right.
something, tell me that we're going to get away from eggplant in the next couple of years.
Oh, no, I think we've passed it.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Good. That's
We've
good to know.
passed it, but I will, it's interesting. I usually have a mix of projects where I've got some of them are very neutral, like neutral color stories, and some are very colorful. Absolutely everything I'm doing right now is color.
But the
It seems like-
palette has gotten more organic, don't you think?
absolutely, yeah. But a
All
lot more,
right.
it just seems like there's just a lot more color, and I think people look to color because it is like sort of, it is mood changing and transformative, and it's easy.
Yeah.
To introduce
your
like, color,
crayons.
paint a wall.
What was the name of the green?
That green, I think, I call it Granny Apple Green.
Yeah, apple,
Yeah.
Granny
So,
Smith.
there are a number of companies that have that color, but it's an old-fashioned color, Granny Apple Green.
If I buy the book, will I find out what exact pant color that is, or do I have to call you?
It's probably mentioned in the chapter, but you can always call me.
You got it. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you.
DJ.
Thank you.
And
Thank
thank you
you.
always,
Bye.
Roberto.
Okay, bye.
Of course. See you.
Ciao.
Ciao.
All clear. Great show.